Welcome back to Christ's Millennial Kingdom, the 1,000 Years of Peace and its Destruction. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 6 yet, I suggest you go do that so that you can get a better understanding of where we are, because each episode builds off the previous part. In a way, they all stand alone, but it's best if you have all the information before you're here at part 7, the French Connection. So we're going to start with Pope Sixtus III. And why will we do that? Well, the number of man is 6. The number of the beast is 666, right? So Pope Sixtus III, meaning there was Sixtus, and Sixtus. Pope 666 essentially is Pope Sixtus III. So Pope Sixtus III was the Bishop of Rome from 31 July 432 till his death on 18 August 440. His ascension to the papacy is associated with a period of increased construction in the city of Rome. His feast day is celebrated by Catholics on the 28th of March. So what's interesting about Pope Sixtus III particularly is that, well, you can see here in this depiction to the left, he has 3 crowns on his head. That's very interesting. They get smaller as they go up. He has a rod with 2 crosses on it. He's holding a book, but he was Pope just prior to the fall of Rome. So Rome fell in 476, according to the timeline that we're given. So we can't actually be totally sure of any of these events being the dates that were given, but it is very close to the fall of Rome. Pope Sixtus III was Pope, and only for 8 years. I mean, just over 8 years. 8 years and not even 3 weeks he was Pope, and he died. So that's very interesting. All right, again, I'm bringing this back into play here because we're about to look at something that goes with it. So after the defeat of the forces of evil, mountains will crumble, the earth will become a flat plain, and judgment will be instituted on the people of earth. The true believers in Christ will be rewarded with heaven and eternal communion with God, and the disbelievers and unrepentant sinners will be consigned to hell and eternal separation from God. So the earth will become a flat plain. So let's take a look at the Urbano Map of 1587 again. So here's the full map. If you guys remember, I believe it was part 2. We touched on the map, and you can see that it is a full map here, right? It's flat. It's a flat plane on here. You have this outside ring where this part is very hot. You got other parts are not as hot, right? If you guys look up that map, it's very interesting. Here's South America. Here's Africa. You got North America here, Canada. You got Russia over here touching North America, so they were still together. Just a very interesting map. I suggest you guys really go look this map up for yourself and zoom in on all the different phenomena that are inside of this map. Like you can see right here, this is some kind of large bird, so large that it's carrying an elephant. You have these large birds over here that are actually larger than this bird carrying the elephant. So just imagine how large they actually are. There's sea monsters. There's all sorts of stuff going on. There's fleets of ships. And this map was created in 1587. Tierra del Fuego, what we call Antarctica, was known as Tierra del Fuego. Very interesting. I suggest you go look at it. Okay, so the Dark Ages, that's what we're going to get into now. The fall of Rome was completed in 476 when the German chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus. The East, always richer and stronger, continued as the Byzantine Empire through the European Middle Ages. The Dark Ages were between the 5th and 14th centuries, lasting 900 years. The timeline falls between the fall of the Roman Empire and the Renaissance. It has been called the Dark Ages because many suggest that this period saw little scientific and cultural advancement. However, the term doesn't stand up to much scrutiny, and many medieval historians have dismissed it. So it starts, the fall of Rome starts the Dark Ages, right? So if we understand that those that were running Rome were the synagogue of Satan, they were the ones who, when they lost power, now they have gained it again in whatever way that they did. They called at least 900 years up to 1,000 years the Dark Ages, which was most likely the Millennial Kingdom. So remember, 476 it fell, right? So this Urbano Map of 1587, it's a flat plain 1,000 years later. That's why I had that in there. It's interesting. After Rome fell. Now, it could have always been a flat plain. I'm not saying it wasn't, but it's just interesting timing. That's all. And I'm not saying that it's completely flat either. So, there's very many different ideas. I'm not taking a stance here on the shape of the earth at the moment. So why is it called the Dark Ages? Francesco Petrarca, known as Petrarch, was the first person to coin the term Dark Ages. He was an Italian scholar of the 14th century. He called it the Dark Ages as he was dismayed at the lack of good literature at that time. Okay, so that doesn't really make too much sense. And before we get into that next slide, that doesn't make too much sense that it's the lack of good literature, and they say scientific and cultural advancement. There was little of it because Rome wasn't in charge. But it just doesn't make sense when you go back and look at the way things were built. And you can check this out. Autodidactic does a lot of good stuff on this. Conspiracy R Us does a lot of good stuff on this. That between the years like 230 AD and 930 AD, there were no bathrooms created. There was no housing created. It's a very interesting thing. Go check that out. But we see that there's probably the history that we're given, his story that we're given by the victors who are now running things, that they don't want us to know what was going on. And it's just ridiculous to think that there were no bathrooms created and no housing created for 700 years. That's just ridiculous. But they say the only thing that was created were cathedrals that looked exactly like the ones that were created prior to that, and the ones that some of them still stand today. All right. So now we want to go into the medieval warm period. So how would it be the Dark Ages if there was a medieval warming period? Why would it be the Dark Ages? Remember, everything is inverse in this world. So the medieval warm period, also known as the medieval climate optimum or the medieval climatic anomaly, was a time of warm climate in the North Atlantic region that lasted from 950 to 1250. And remember what we talked about with the sevenfold sun and how the ring that is on the outside that we now call Antarctica was a larger sun was going around there that exploded, right? Well, it became that size. It grew to be bigger and warmed everything. So just remember that the years are always perverted. When they tell us 950 to 1250, I don't know that to be true, but we do know that there was a warming period in the time that they call the Dark Ages. So it was likely related to temperature increases elsewhere, but other regions meanwhile got colder, such as the tropical Pacific. Average global mean temperatures have been calculated to be similar to the early mid-20th century warming. Possible causes of the medieval warm period include increased solar activity, decreased volcanic activity, and changes in ocean circulation. Or it could be that the Earth became a flat plane and now things changed. I don't know that to be true. Just an interesting idea. But also, the tilt of the Earth could have happened if you believe in spherical Earth. That there could have been some tilt that happened in this period that made the places that we know warmer got colder, but the colder places got warmer. It could have changed in a number of different ways. So, we're open to all types of ideas here, but it was definitely warmer for a period of time, followed by the Little Ice Age. So the Little Ice Age was a period of regional cooling, particularly pronounced in the North Atlantic region, that occurred after the medieval warm period. It was not a true ice age of global extent. The term was introduced into scientific literature by Francois E. Mathis in 1939. The time period has been conventionally defined as extending from the 16th to the 19th centuries, but some experts prefer an alternative time span from about 1300 to about 1850. The NASA Earth Observatory notes 3 particularly cold intervals. One began about 1650, another one about 1770, and the last in 1850, all of which were separated by intervals of slight warming. So firstly, when we talk about what's going on today's age with the climate and the changing weather conditions, this is a thing that always occurs, right? And it happens all throughout so much of the Earth's history. It has always been that way. But let's look at specifically, it says there was the Little Ice Age between 1300 to 1850. Now, again, we don't know those years to be true. We don't know what year it actually is. But let's say, why would it go to be from a warming period to a Little Ice Age? Because the sun exploded. That is why it went to a colder time period. The sun exploded. The sun grew larger, and it was larger, and then it exploded. It became sevenfold, and then it exploded. And then it was cold. And it started right at 1850. Again, this is, or they say it ended at 1850. So it's just very interesting that all these things happen to occur in the 1800s, in the 1700s and 1800s, that so many events that we're told have happened. And they all make sense when you start putting them together in this way. All right? So 1850, that's when the World's Fairs started. 1770, what started right around there was the United States of America, the Bavarian Illuminati. A lot of different things were starting around these time periods. So let's look at Pope Sixtus III again for a minute. And we got him on the right. And on the left, we have Krampus and St. Nick. Now that hat that St. Nick is wearing is awfully similar to the hat that Pope Sixtus III is wearing. And Krampus, if you aren't aware, Krampus is from Austria and Germany, and he is what we now in America know today as the devil. He's depicted as a red or a black devilish-looking figure with horns, a long tongue, hooves for feet, and he always has chains around him, locked in chains. Now remember that. So he comes around on December 5th and he beats the non-believers for not being believers. He's allowed to beat the non-believers. So if you look at Satan, and Satan is allowed to do things to those who don't believe in Christ, well, Krampus is doing that. He is beating the non-believers. And then on December 6th, St. Nicholas comes along and leaves gifts for the little boys and girls. But if they are non-believers, then they get a rod instead of a gift. It's very interesting timing, how this all occurs. And this dates way back, and they're not even sure exactly when this goes back to, but I saw all sorts of different dates, so I'm not even going to throw any out there because I did just a little bit of research on it to figure out when these depictions started occurring. And I got things from the 1700s, I saw things in the 1200s, I saw things in the 1900s. There's not a consensus agreement on when these depictions occurred, but there's all these depictions of this devil being in chains. And what this being Krampus does is he beats the children with the chains that he is wrapped in. So today in modern day Germany, and maybe Austria as well, I believe it is Austria as well, they dress up, people dress up like this, and they go around and they beat the children. And parents will actually pay to have Krampus visit their home and terrorize their children. I've had a client, when I was doing my energy work in the past, who I did a spiritual baptism with, who had Krampus attached to her. Now, I didn't know Krampus at the time, but what I saw was a black being with a goat-like face, or a bull-like face is what I kept saying. It was a bull-like face with hooves, and it was attached to her. She was from Germany, and I didn't know that at the time. That she told me afterwards, because, okay, let me just try to get this point across, is that I saw this without knowing she was from Germany, and without knowing that when she was a little girl, her parents had Krampus come to their home and beat them. Not necessarily beat them, but whip them with the chains, terrorize them. I didn't know that. I didn't even know, I have heard of Krampus, but I didn't know that was a thing parents did. So when I saw this thing attached to her, it was very strange, and I didn't have a name for it. The next day, as I'm watching something on YouTube, the very next morning, I was watching something on YouTube, or rather a notification popped up for someone I was subscribed to made a new video, and it was about Krampus. And it was exactly the being that I saw. So I sent it to that woman, and she told me that story, that when she was a little girl, her parents had Krampus come to her house and that, do its thing. So this is a very real entity that I didn't see chains on it, but this was a very real entity that I encountered. And there was more to it that I'm not even going to get into, but it was a very intimidating thing. It was very disgusting. So moving along, we have Krampus always being pictured with chains, right? Remember, Satan is going to be loosed from the pit. He's going to be unchained. So you see him here on the left, his chains are down off his wrist, but they're still around his feet. On the right here, he is chained, but he always has the chains. Now look at it. He has like a hoof foot. This foot is like a human foot with very long nails. He has a very long tail, which I saw that was part of what I saw with that woman. But the tail, very interesting. I'm just remembering now that the scorpion race that was going to be released from the pit would have tails that could do different things like they were snakes. And that is what I saw with this being. It actually had its tail was in going through that woman, my former client. It was going through her abdomen, and it was like attached to her, wrapped around her. And it was like this snake was acting like it was the penis of Krampus. But now that I'm looking at this depiction, it could have very easily have been the tail. And now that I'm remembering the Bible verses, it was probably the tail. But this is what I saw. I mean, it's very strange, but it has like a man-like face on a bull-like body that's all black with hooves. This one is not exactly. This one on the left is more of what I saw. A very long tongue, very disgusting creature. You know, he's got the tail here. He's got children in his backpack. He's chained up, right? All right, so it was Austria. Okay, very interesting that it comes from Austria. Now, Austria also has this interesting phenomena where there are buildings with the letters AEIOU on them. Now, the reason why that's interesting is that in ancient Hebrew, they didn't use vowels because they were too sacred, because the name of God was so sacred they couldn't write it down. So what they wrote down instead was the YHWH, Yahweh or Yahuwah, however it is pronounced. But if we look at the word vowel, when we break it down in English, it's vow-el. Vow meaning a solemn promise, el meaning God. So a solemn promise from God or a solemn promise to God. Vowel. So what are our vowels? AEIOU are our vowels. And they were so sacred that they couldn't write vowels down in Hebrew. So why does Austria have these vowels written on their building? So there's a bunch of Latin words here, phrases on the screen that I don't know the Latin. I'm not going to attempt to read the Latin to you, but I'll give you some of the things that these are interpretations of what they possibly mean. So you got Austria is destined to rule the world. Austria will exist to the end of the world. Austria is a best united kingdom. The emperor is the best protector of justice. All soil is subject to Austria, and that's an interpretation 16th, 17th century. Austria is the ruler of the whole world. During the occupation of Vienna under the Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus, 1485, the Viennese used the following interpretation. First of all, Austria is lost. In 1951, Eugen Rosenstock Hussey, 1888 to 1973, offered the reading, Austria is the image of Europe, burden and pressure to unite. And this one I put in there because I like this one the best, and I have it highlighted here. There is also the interpretation as a royal judge chancery motto with a biblical reference, love to avenge the unjust. All right, that's interesting. This is where Krampus is coming from, and we're talking about avenging the unjust. We're talking about Krampus, St. Nick, December 5th and December 6th coming, all that stuff, right? So here's some depictions of the AEIOU on buildings. Now you got to remember the U's in Latin look like V's. And there's a weird thing going on with the numbers. Now I didn't spend a great amount of time looking, but I did spend time looking to decipher what this date actually is. And I couldn't find anything that would help me anything even similar to these numbers that they have here. We're told this says like 1445. Now, we don't know that, right? And there's reason to believe that this may not even be a 1 always, right? Now, here it looks like it could be that. But over here on the right, we have the AEIOU, and then it says 1446, I guess. I couldn't find anything with ribbons that said that they were 4s. I couldn't find any numbers ever being recorded as ribbons. So the fact that they're on there, it's very interesting. Now here we go with the AEIOU on this building. Look at the I in AEIOU and look at the 1 in, I guess this is supposed to say 1475. I don't really know. But the 1 and the I look exactly the same. So again, here on the right, you have FT AEIOU. Then at the bottom, you have 1466, right? Well, why is there a dot in between the 1 and the 4? So this gets into the coins and the buildings and the tombstones and the maps that all had I's or J's all over the world, and then the 3-digit number of the year. So this could be I 466. This could be I 475. Now what's the I stand for? Jesus. The J, Jesus. Not every language has a J, so they would use an I. Greek and Latin specifically were I'll say Latin is certainly the global language. Greek was a very popular language. Obviously, that's what the Bible was written in. They also don't have a J. They would use an I. So are we talking about these depictions saying, in the year of our Lord, and his name being the sacred vowels, I 445, I 446? Is this where maybe Jesus was in Austria? When we go back to that last interpretation here I've highlighted, love to avenge the unjust. The AEIOU in Latin, Amor electus inustis ordinor ultor. Love to avenge the unjust. And that's exactly what Jesus does. He avenges the unjust, right? Okay, here you got another one, the AEIOU. Then you got this king here. Remember, Pope Sixtus III was holding something similar to this in his reign as Pope in the 400s that we're told of. And it has the double thing going on right there. And then look over here. This could be an I. I mean, look here and here. Very similar. Very similar. I, and then what? 470, and I don't know, maybe a 3. We can't really see. The bushes is kind of in the way for that last one. We don't know when these are actually from. And it's very interesting the way that they come out. So Austria, Germany, very interesting, right? So if there was some Saint Nick like character over there, and we have Krampus is allowed to beat the non-believers, I mean, it lines up with the Christian story that gets retold and changed just a little bit in Catholicism and so on and so forth. And Catholicism sets the legalese for all of Christianity. It's very much like Catholicism is the legal world of Christianity, and that people just fall in line with Catholicism thinking throughout history. All right, so we got Krampus again. Now, who does Krampus look like? He has the chains, he has hooves for feet, he has the tail that we talked about, he has the tongue sticking out, he has the horns. Who does Krampus look like? Look at this. Gross von Krampus. You have him chained up, pulling the little girl's hair, pulling the boy's ears. This is a Christmas card, by the way, over in Austria. Gross von Krampus. Look at this guy on the right here. Has children tied up all the way to the back, and it looks like some little devil figure all the way back here is at the back of the line. But he has a witch broom, it looks like. He's chained up. It's very interesting. They always got the horns, but he looks like Baphomet. Looks just like Baphomet. The goat-headed being, got the horns. It looks like a man walking upright, got the hooves for feet. Right? Could these depictions be the same, one and the same, Baphomet and Krampus? Could they be one and the same? Well, Baphomet is a French word, so could Baphomet be when the Austrians and Germans call him Krampus? Could he have gone to France and been called Baphomet? I think that's very likely. So let's look at Baphomet. Modern scholars agree that the name of Baphomet was an old French corruption of the name Mohammed. That is interesting. You don't hear that very often. With the interpretation being that some of the Templars, through their long military occupation of the Outremer, had begun incorporating Islamic ideas into their belief system, and that this was seen and documented by the inquisitors as hearsay. Alain Demerger, however, rejects the idea that the Templars could have adopted the doctrines of the enemies. Helen Nicholson writes that the charges were essentially manipulative. The Templars were accused of becoming fairy tale Muslims. Medieval Christians believed that Muslims were idolatrous and worshipped Muhammad as a god, with Mahomet becoming Mamet in English, meaning an idol or false god. This idol worship is attributed to Muslims in several chansons de geste. I don't know how to say that. For example, one finds the gods Baphomet et Travagon in a provincial poem on the life of Saint Honore, completed in 1300. In the Chanson de Simon Pouillet, written before 1235, a Saracen idol is called Baphomet. So is Baphomet and Muhammad the same word? So now this is greatly interesting. Is Krampus, Baphomet, and Muhammad, are they all one and the same and just being talked about in different ways? And when you look at some of Muhammad's different things and you have this in mind, well, that will change some of the ways that you understand what's being talked about. Now, I'm not saying that I think this. This is what I have found in my studies, that Baphomet comes from Muhammad, and that the Templars, they are the ones, the Knights Templars who were expelled in 1773, right, who actually, Friday the 13th, 1307, is when they were mostly killed, which is why we consider Friday the 13th to be a bad luck day, is that's got incorporated into our understandings of everything. But the Knights Templars, who were not of Christ, who were doing things in the name of Christ to pervert the name of Christ, were then taking Muhammad and into France, calling it Baphomet. So Muhammad, Baphomet, and then Muhammad also gets translated into Mamet in English, which is an idol or false god. Baphomet, an idol or false god. Mamet also means money. Muhammad is the one who created money. So this all is tying in together very interestingly. This is all coming together full circle for you guys to see what's going on. Baphomet continued. In the 18th century, speculative theories arose that sought to tie the Knights Templar with the origins of Freemasonry. Bookseller, Freemason, and Illuminatus, the Illuminati, Christoph Friedrich Nicolai, 1733 to 1811, in Versuch über die, I can't pronounce all that, that's a lot of German, 1782, was the first to claim that the Templars were Gnostics and that Baphomet was formed from the Greek words, I don't know how to say those words, Baphometus, to mean baptism of wisdom. Okay, here it all ties in. The baptism of wisdom from Baphomet, right? The enlightener, the people who are Illuminati, Freemasons, Knights Templar, Muhammad, Baphomet, Krampus, all coming together in one. Nikolai attached to it the idea of the image of the supreme God in the state of quietude attributed to him by the Manichaean Gnostics, according to F.J.M. Reinhard, and supposed that the Templars had a secret doctrine and initiations of several grades which the Seraphicians had communicated to them. He further connected the Figura Baphometae with the pentagram of Pythagoras. So the seal of Satan, that's what the pentagram of Pythagoras is, gets connected to Baphomet, who is today's modern version of Satan, who is Krampus in Austria, who is allowed to beat the non-believers of Christ. This all ties together, folks. If you can see, if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you can see this all tying together. And this should give you an understanding that Christ is more real than we have given him credit for, that the perversion by the Knights Templar in creating these secret societies, that we're perverting things, that, and we know Islam is not what it used to be. What it used to be is something entirely different than what it is known today as. And that's pretty mainstream, actually, if you look into it. What properly was the sign of the Baphomet, Figura Baphometae, which was depicted on the breast of the bust representing the Creator, cannot be exactly determined. I believe it to have been the Pythagorean pentagon of health and prosperity. It is well known how holy this figure was considered, and that the Gnostics had much in common with the Pythagoreans. From the prayers which the soul shall recite according to the diagram of the Ophite worshippers, when they on their return to God are stopped by the archons and their purity has to be examined, it appears that these serpent worshippers believed they must produce a token that they had been clean on earth. I believe that this token was also the holy pentagon, the sign of their initiation. And that is from Symbols and Symbolism and Freemasons Quarterly Magazine, 1854. The holy pentagon, the sign of their initiation. It all ties together. Gnostics get tied in with all of this. So, what else comes from France? The Statue of Liberty, right? And we went over that in, I believe, part 5. The Statue of Liberty, or the Statue of Lucifer, as it may be more accurately depicting Lucifer. And also it's trying to depict the seventh angel of Revelation. So Mithras on the left was the template Auguste Bartholdi and structural engineer Gustave Eiffel used for the Statue of Liberty. So you can see the rays around Mithras' head, just like the rays around the Statue of Liberty. And you can see that the Statue of Liberty is not a woman. This is totally a man. So, very interesting, right? Mithras is said to have his birthday on December 25th. So many different characteristics that are trying to be similar to the coming Christ Jesus at that time. And he just wasn't Christ. He was one of these fake Christs. And what's always depicted on the Statue of Liberty, not always, but in the depiction, is the broken chains. Just like with Krampus having broken chains, the Statue of Liberty also has broken chains. So Lucifer freed from his pit, freed from his chains. All right, so you see why it's called the French Connection, because it all goes back to France. Now, if you saw the updated version of part 6, you would see that I talked about Georgia, the state of Georgia at that time, and just said to keep your eyes on Georgia for later in the series. And if you haven't seen that in part 6, go back and watch that part. I added on about 5 minutes towards the end there, at the very end almost. So the country of Georgia is what we're about to get into now. So let's get into the definition of IA. So IA is a suffix, and it can be a territory or country, like Georgia. It's New Latin from Latin IA and Greek IA, and it means, one of the definitions, things derived from, relating to, or belonging to. So IA George, right? So things derived from George, things relating to George, or things belonging to George. Okay? Just keep that in mind for a moment. Job 41, 1 to 11. Now I have some of these highlighted here, but I will read you all of them, and then we'll go back if we need to. Verse 1. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Will it make an agreement with you for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you make a pet of it like a bird, or put it on a leash for the young women in your house? Will traders barter for it? Will they divide it up among the merchants? Can you fill its hide with harpoons, or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. And this is God speaking directly to Job. So read those highlighted versions again. So I'll read it for the audio-only audience. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? Can you fill its hide with harpoons, or its head with fishing spears? No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. All right, keep that in mind for the next screen we're going to get into. So if you look at Georgia here, you got Turkey here. So if you remember back where the 7 churches of Asia were in Turkey, right next to Georgia. Okay? And we have a modern day conflict going on with Russia, and over here in the top left off the screen would be Ukraine. Okay? So Georgia is right in the center of these countries over here. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Iran. Okay, so that you have an idea of where Georgia is if you're only listening. So who do we have always depicted as slaying a dragon, putting a spear or hook through the jaw of the serpent, as described in Job in the chapters and verses we just read, is Saint George. Right? Saint George, always depicted as killing the serpent, riding in on a white horse, saving the princess. That's how he's depicted. In statues and art, that's how he's always depicted. Look, you have the queen or the princess being saved from the dragon being slayed by St. George, putting a spear or hook through its jaw. Very interesting. St. George. Every depiction, he is piercing the jaw of the serpent with a hook or spear. I mean, there's so many of them all over the world. So many of them. Remember, Job 41, 1-11. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? This is God talking. Everything under heaven belongs to me. So no one else can stand up against it. Any hope of subduing it is false. Except for God. Will they divide it up among the merchants? Can you fill its hide with harpoons or its head with fishing spears? That is exactly what he's doing. This is prophecy being fulfilled. God telling you what God will do. Who then can stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. Even the country of Georgia. The country of Georgia. He's given his own country because of what he did. Depicted all throughout the world, no matter the religion or geographical area. Now here, you see he has a sword. This one, he has a flag. But they're all over the world. St. George slays the dragon. It doesn't matter if it's Islam. You guys should really look this up. There is not much history on St. George. There is not that much known about him. But he's depicted everywhere. Australia, the Middle East, everywhere. It doesn't matter what denomination. And what we're told is everyone will bow down to Christ when he slays the dragon. And this title here, why St. George is a Palestinian hero, well, let's click on it. And let's go to that article for a second. Because he is a Palestinian hero. Always depicted slaying the dragon. You got the princess here. You got people cheering him on. He's a Palestinian hero, folks. As England celebrates the day of its patron saint, many Palestinians are gearing up for their own forthcoming celebrations of the figure they also regard as a hero. A familiar flag flaps in the wind above a Palestinian church in the West Bank village of Al-Qadr. The red cross on a white background has been associated with St. George since the time of the Crusades. It is the national flag of England and is also used as an emblem by other countries and cities that have adopted him as their own patron saint. However, Palestinians have particular reason to display the symbol and revere the early Christian martyr. For them, he is a local hero who opposed the persecution of his fellow Christians in the Holy Land. We believe he was a great martyr for his faith who defended the Christian faith and values, says Greek Orthodox Archbishop Attila Hanna. By making sacrifices for his faith, he was able to defeat evil. We take St. George as a patron for people living here, and as he was born in historic Palestine, We pray to him to remember us and this holy land. And the St. George's flag flies above a Palestinian church. All right. So, there you go. Very interesting. Remember, the 7 churches of Asia in modern day Turkey are right next to the land of George. You got Georgia and you got Turkey, Asia. Remember that, Asia, Turkey. Very, very interesting. And that is the end of part 7. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 6 yet, go back and watch it. Thank you all for being here. Please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, turn on your notifications. Comment, let me know what you think of the series so far. Let me know if this has given you any ideas and share them in the comments below.